Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Bاسم, the lead economist at the European Bank, specialized in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region. Dr. Omar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Omar, first of all, we're talking about the public sector, the public educational system, rather. Now, the educational system is one sector that all Egyptians have been calling for developing for a few years now. And the presidency has showed its strong will and serious intentions of developing this integral sector. But it seems such a huge task. We're talking about nurseries up until higher education. Many stages. It's such a big task. How do you start developing this public sector?
Well, thank you for the question, actually. And as you just mentioned, it has been a while that the Egyptian population in general, foreign investors, waiting for a revamp of the entire education system that was kind of just lagging behind. It had been neglected, to say, for a long period of time. So now, the whole program that is being taken place now has a forward-looking perspective where we want to be with education in the coming 5 years and 25 years, actually, because it needs one generation to start from nursery all the way to educate people to cope with the new world we'll be living in 25 years from now. So we need to have a vision of what this world would look like, these mega trends we are all talking about. You know, now we have this acceleration of a digital era,
yes,
pushed by COVID-19. So we are moving with this, digitization on all levels. So we need to educate our kids to be heavily adaptable to these new technologies. We talk about future production with robots and so on. So this technology will just evolve. There's no way back. It's just one way.
Yes.
So we need to rethink the education system to try to bring us where we would like to be. One of the main issues, is what we call a mismatch between education that we have today and the labor force that we educated and what the labor market needs. And we have this issue today. So we graduate engineers, but we need accountants, you see. So we have this. So what is happening now is a deep reflection. What do we want to become as a nation in the future? And how we get ready for it through education. But that's a long-term perspective.
Yes.
And then we have the shorter term, because we have our graduates who are here seeking job, some mismatch, and we have what is called, skills building, skills development. It's a little bit different story where we educate our graduates to the exact need of investors today. 6 months intensive training on a very specific task. We need a computer engineer, social media expert, 6 months intensive training, most probably part of it online, because online education is flourishing. All these courses have been developed by very decent universities worldwide. So you have the content, you have the material, and then you educate them, and more importantly, application. So you train them on how to deliver, how to perform. This is skills building. And then you can retool yourself. You can, for a few years, become a social media expert, and then you can evolve into, an editor, videographic, because you learn how to do this. 6 months intensive, you practice, and then you become knowledgeable enough. You work, you gain experience, and you evolve, depending on the market need.
Yes.
So it's a little bit kind of a reversal way of looking at things, but this is what, the dynamic labor market needs today.
Yes. Okay. We'll take it one step at a time. Now, you've mentioned a certain vision that we should have for the public educational system. Before we start talking about online learning and the age of digitalization here in Egypt, which the whole country is going through, what sort of vision are we having to, or what sort of aim or model are we following, hopefully, to reach? Are we following a European model of education, an American one, a Japanese one? Because there's been a lot of talk of different kinds of education now. Do we have a certain vision that we're actually aiming for?
Yeah, I believe what we are doing practically is an Egyptian vision, which is a blending of different best practices. One main theme of it is a Japanese, actually, because it looks at a student from a holistic point of view, from how we want this young man to serve the society in general, to help himself and to help others. So it's not an individualistic look at, I need to develop my skills to become, how would I fit in my society? Different approach, if you like, to education altogether. And this has been proven on the long term to help developing a nation much better. So not just one individual at a time, a whole nation. And for this you need different skills. You need to unleash potential. It's not about just learning by heart and not at all, actually. It's just developing your natural talents. So we accompany kids and we see in what field they seem to perform best. They want to become an artist, they have some skills, some talents, and we develop it in sport, in any field, mathematics. And then you have this variety of curriculum that will be versatile enough to adapt to the need to each child. And here comes the role of the teacher. So, so it's a whole new system. So educating, training, teachers is here essential. And it's being done. That's why it's taken a little bit more time. Some teachers adapt faster to the new system than others. Younger ones, because they are much more technology connected, aware, and they already learned new skills of teaching. They can do this, they can perform this very easily, if you like. Older ones who have been used to the old system might take some more time, more training, but I believe it's going to be a natural selection, a natural evolution where talented teachers are going to prevail.
Yes. Well, you took me to the next step, which is the training of the teachers. Now, it's not just the teachers, but you also need the people who are involved in the administrative work in schools, in nurseries, in schools for children with special needs. You're talking about higher education as well. Now, how long would it take to develop and train teachers, specialists, psychologists, administrative people, faculty members of all sorts of different levels of academic educational process? How long would it take to actually have a big pool of all the workforce for the educational system?
Well, if you want to develop it fully and to have it 100% performing to its best, it takes a long time. It takes years. But we can also aim for a second best, which is, again, as we're talking about skills, is to provide up best standards of skills for each of these functions that you just mentioned. Psychologists, support team, admin people. So you just give them the excellent training and to, let's say, 100 people, and then you select those who really perform best. So you take the top 30, and then you really empower them to go and deliver, and to try to start with the younger, so at least, you dedicate, while you are training all the others. So it's intensive training, practicing, selecting the best, and empowering them, and just taking the time. So in the short term, you have a pool of maybe some schools who are being selected as a trial, and so on. And then you see in which areas of Egypt do you need this the most. In Cairo, in remote areas, because we really want education to come to each single Egyptian wherever they live. So this also needs experimentation.
And who trains them?
So you get actually trainers from abroad. It happened. I think we have a program with the World Bank, which something like $500 million. The largest program to support education in Egypt ever. And big part of it is how to train teachers, trainers, to get up to us, and to bring international experts, in the field, like, the cooperation with the Japanese system, to come and train teachers, get them up to the level, intensive training, and then we move on. But it needs financing, and at least we have the financing secured, which is not bad.
Well, whenever we talk about public educational system, there's always this stereotypical image of many kids crowded and crammed into a single classroom, and many university classes filled with tens and maybe even hundreds of people in one lecture hall. What is being done? I mean, I understand that we are opening a lot of new universities, talking about the university in Abu Dhabi, the Red Sea, and Alamein City, and all the new cities as well. But what is being done to solve such an issue? Because no matter how good the education is, if there are so many kids in one classroom, it's still very difficult to focus.
This is absolutely right, actually. It reminds me of my old days at, at university. In the main lecturer room, if you like, or something like a few thousand. And then we have sections. And in each section, we normally should have been something like 30, 40, 50. But because we all like one specific teacher with something like 500 in the classroom, so what can you learn? But because we prefer this guy and us the other. So I understand perfectly where you come from. And that's why the idea of increasing the number of schools, definitely. Decreasing the number of student to teacher ratio.
Yes.
It's being done. It was very high. Now I think it's in the 20s, and 20s is not very large actually by international standards. So it had been brought down. But the idea as well is to reach students with a high level of education, the same level of public education you can get in Cairo or elsewhere, to be provided wherever they are. Because parents, by default, number one concern for them is their kids' education.
Yes.
So if they think that the other school that is 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers in the other city is better, they will tend to send their kids to this school, and it might be overcrowded and so on. So we need to just try as much as possible to get closer to people wherever they are with decent schooling. And as you mentioned, universities as well, because if you want to populate a city, you need to have schools and universities, because parents will go and live, kids will go and learn. If there is no university, people will not go. They will go to retire, because they will be wherever their kids are. This is how families in Egypt still behave, right? So I think by developing these new cities and having a decent school system that most probably, again, would be built on best standards. No need to reform. You are hiring from scratch, so you hire the best. So the reputational issue saying, in Alamein, you have amazing school, amazing public schools. Well, people will be willing to go and live in Alamein or Al Galala, or where, because they know there are good schools and a good university up to higher standards, where actually also education will be tailored to the need of the city. For example, we are in Galala, we have Ain Sokhna, and we have the Suez Canal Economic Zone. So this university is created to cater to the need of this zone. One example is we want to develop logistics. Well, so in this university, you will have best, excellent professors coming to teach best practices in logistics. So you go, you live, you graduate, and you are kind of securing a job, because you will have a hands-on training in this, private investments. So it's just the right way of doing things. So by developing these new cities, you promote the right way of education that is not, it's difficult to reform elsewhere, if you like.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, these new cities are only a part of the vision for Egypt to achieve Sustainable Development 2030. Along with it is the educational sector. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Minister of Education Tariq Shawqi said Egypt's Vision 2030 aims at providing education and training to everyone at high quality, without discrimination, and within an efficient, just, fair and sustainable institutional system that focuses on students and trainees who are able to think and use technology. The minister said the vision includes improving the quality of education to meet the international standards adding that education process is of common responsibility and the society has to be ready to accept development in order to guarantee high-quality graduates. By 2030, the government aims to ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable and quality early childhood, primary and secondary educations and have access to quality early childhood development, care and primary education so that they are ready for primary education and ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including universities. By 2030, it also aims to substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills, in order for them to be employed, find decent jobs, and also help them in entrepreneurship. This in addition to eliminating gender disparities in education and ensuring equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable, including people with disabilities. The government is looking forward to ensuring that all youth and substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy by 2030.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Amar. Now, Doctor, this revamp of the whole public educational system is quite a costly one. I mean, talking about the universities just developing existing and establishing new universities, about 27, costs the government about 36 billion Egyptian pounds. And that's the universities alone. So let alone the secondary school and primary school. Now, is this solely the responsibility of the government and the public sector, or is it then time for the private sector to come and join in and maybe invest within the educational system? And if they do, why would they opt to work in developing the public educational system and not just focus on the private educational program?
I think the ideal scenario would be a collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. We call it very often public-private partnership, the PPP famous slogan. But here actually education particularly, it makes perfect sense because we educate for whom? For the private sector. So they know better what they need. So by having this interrelation between the private sector on one hand, telling the public sector, I would like you to educate for me chemical engineers because we want to develop some chemical production and we have a plant of 10 billion. Okay, so what exactly do you need? And then they can finance because they need those guys. And by the way, Egyptian labor force is cheap and highly competent when well trained. So if they're not trained, they're not trained. But when they are well trained, they are brilliant. So the private investors worldwide know this. And the geographical location of Egypt in the coming years being so central and having the COVID-19 issue showing how difficult it is to ship everything from East Asia to Europe and to the US, having Egypt as a focal point for production is actually in the mind of the international investment community. In theory, Egypt should be the hub of production for the world, actually. But what we need the right qualified labor. And for this, the private sector, by financing, like it happens all over the world, shares, department, sections in different public universities, so it's a collaboration, where actually they get them to be trained the way they want them, and then they hire them. That's the way to go. So this is a very strong collaboration moving forward. On another level, we have private investment is for profit. By default, so we, as teachers of economics, we teach them to maximize profit. But actually, if you let the private sector engage in all levels of education, from nursery to universities, and we have it actually all over, by increasing their number, just the competition itself would decrease the cost. And then you will have a more accessible private education for middle class. So you will have all the level of education, and instead of having the public sector, the government, taking the burden of educating all our kids, the private sector can take part of it, because actually it will just be a natural competition, more choice. Parents will be more inclined to go to this school. We like those teachers. We like this management style. We like this approach. you have a variety. So there is a strong room, actually, with the growth in income in Egypt, and this is something is happening, and it's going to increase even more in the coming 2 to 10 years. It's going to be really a strong trend, really. And this will help the middle class flourishing and seeking something else. I want my kids to get perfect English. So I want them to put in this school to get this linguistic skill, if you like, and to perform better. So this mix between fully private investment and collaboration between the private sector and the government in education, especially higher education, is the way to go. And I think it is happening, but we need more of it.
And do you see in the near future, however you define near, a serious competition between public education and private education?
I see the competition starting between private education. So this will happen. But the government's role is to initiate something. You are in a new city, you are in a new capital, you are in Alamein, you are in Galala. You need to create your own schools, because if you wait for private sector to come, maybe it might take several years, and you don't want this. You have a strategy, you need to do it, and you do it so well that when private investors will come to invest in education in these areas, they will try to compete with the private sector, by trying to provide the best quality of education they can get, because they will say, well, these new schools are really doing well, so how can we compete? We need to provide some value added and so on, which might come from training more than education, by in blending part of education along with the just normal curriculum that we have.
Dr. Omar, now, since the COVID-19 pandemic took over the whole world, which is for about a year now, a little bit over a year, now we've seen a change of lifestyle as a whole, and one of the main things was the educational process. We see everyone now studying online, e-learning, all the meetings online, and not just education, but every sort of business aspect. Now, Egypt seemed that it was ready and well prepared to such a surprising change of education. Now, we're talking about the age of digitalization, we're talking about vocational training, we're talking about a totally new, different lifestyle for children and for parents watching their kids learning at home. We've seen even the president give a choice for the parents if they want their kids to finish the whole academic year at home or just continue with it online. So we've shown some sort of a resilience and a level of flexibility within the educational process. How would you rate how we handled the situation along with, compared to the other international communities' educational systems?
Listen, comparatively, we have been doing well, like all the others, which is by itself a lot.
It's an achievement.
Yeah, because we tend to believe that actually advanced countries might perform better. They did not. COVID-19 hit everyone by surprise. And what is actually interesting is that teachers were not ready to teach online, let alone kids to learn online. But teachers are not equipped. They don't know how to package a lecture, a course online, how to give assignments online, grade online, give feedback online. So it was quite a challenge. And it's also a matter of talent. Not everyone can perform well online. Some teachers, before even COVID, have started embedding some, videos, sharing, and speeches, and to educate kids. Listen, this is what was said in a TED talk, or this is what was said on such event by Mr. President, so they have been watching videos already. Some others were just old-fashioned, open the book, or write on the board and so on. And they struggle a little bit. And they struggle all over the world, not in Egypt, all over. What actually was interesting to see in Egypt, how reactive the government have been with the measures taken, and also with the spread of tablets, with the spread of the improvement actually in bandwidth, so ensure this communication and actually work from home and learn from home, both. So it's a huge demand on the infrastructure, could have been upgraded very fast to cope with this huge demand. It's one of the sectors that have been really booming worldwide, and in Egypt, the telecommunication sector. So I believe, comparatively, this was done well. The idea is that there is no way back. It doesn't mean we're going to continue online only. We're going to have the normal education system where you go to a classroom and so on. But each school, each university will have to have as well all this material packaged online for anyone who is willing to take it online, and also actually even to reach students in areas where education is not very accessible. So you have the content available online, and you just train them on how to absorb it, and you improve the skills of teachers on how to deliver best practice, best learning experience online. And this is, moving all over the world. So we'll see some countries innovating, and the advantage of Egypt is how to Arabitize, make the content in Arabic to the Arab world, not to Egypt, to the Arab world. So we can export our knowledge to all the Arab world, because they all need it. So this online education for the private sector as well is really a main source of investment in the coming years. Might be flourishing.
Doctor, because we're running out of time, but one final question now. With this whole development of the public educational system, what would you say are the main challenges or obstacles that we might face and might need to overcome to make this a very successful process?
So time is a concern, because everything takes time, definitely. The other point is how adaptive teachers will be, not students, teachers. Students are very clever. Teachers will be to this transformation, and how can we make sure that we adopt the right mix of expertise from other countries. We talk about the Japanese experience. How can we adapt it with the European one, and a little bit, the US, it's a little bit different approach to have the right mix for our culture and our people. It's a little bit challenging. It comes with experimentation, so you need to experiment, trial, error, and it takes time.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Omar has mentioned, it is a process that takes time, but also a process that calls for all Egyptians to be hopeful and aspiring for a better future for the children's and the following next generations. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Bاسم Omar, the leading economist of the European Bank, specialized in the southern and eastern Mediterranean region. Dr. Omar, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.